The summons arrived 6 months after the rescue mission. The Galactic Council was demanding a formal hearing about the growing alliance between humans and Canul. Taman sat in Empress Yuna's private office, reading through the official documents with growing unease. The language was diplomatic, but the underlying message was clear. The Council feared what this friendship might mean for the balance of power. "They cannot order us to attend," Prince Consort Doyen said, his tone harsh. "We are a sovereign empire." "We answer to no one." "True," Yuna agreed, "but refusing would make us appear guilty of hidden agendas. It would give fuel to those who already fear Canul expansion. We should attend and show we have nothing to hide." "And what of Guardian Taman?" Admiral Kwan asked. Over the months, the old soldier had softened toward Taman, though he remained protective of the Empire's interests. "The Council will question him aggressively. Some members actively hate humans for past colonial abuses." Yuna turned to Taman, who had been quiet during the discussion. "What do you think, Guardian? Will you speak for your species at this hearing?" "I'm not a diplomat," Taman said carefully. "I'm a xenobiologist who saved 2 children in a storm. I don't represent humanity's governments." "That may be precisely why you should speak," Yuna replied. "You represent something else. The possibility of individuals choosing kindness over fear. The Council needs to see that, not hear more political speeches from official representatives. My brother Minho says the human colonial administrators are nervous about me," Taman admitted. "They think I've gotten too close to the Canul. They worry I'll say the wrong thing and damage human interests." "And have you gotten too close?" Doyen asked bluntly. Taman thought about the past months, the friendships he had built, the children he had come to love like family, the way Canul crew members now greeted him warmly in corridors. "Maybe, but I don't think that's a bad thing. Understanding each other, caring about each other, that's how species stop being enemies." "Spoken like someone who has never dealt with the Council's politics," Admiral Kwan muttered, but there was a hint of approval in his voice. The decision was made. Taman would represent the human perspective at the hearing, with Yuna and her delegation presenting the Canul position. They would travel to the neutral station where the Galactic Council met, a massive structure that orbited a binary star system at the edge of explored space. The journey took 2 weeks. During that time, Taman prepared by studying Council procedures and learning about the various species that would be present. There were dozens of them, each with their own cultures and concerns. Some were ancient civilizations that had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. Others were newcomers like humanity, still finding their place. Mirai and Jinho helped him practice his presentation. They asked him the hardest questions they could think of, the kind of challenges a child's honesty could cut through. Why should anyone trust humans? What made him different from the humans who had hurt other species? How could one act of kindness prove anything? Because every big change starts with one act, Taman told them. One person deciding to do something different, then another, until eventually the whole galaxy shifts. Do you believe that? Jinho asked seriously. At 9 years old in human terms, he was already showing signs of the leader he would become. I have to, Taman said. Otherwise, what's the point of trying? The council station was overwhelming. It stretched for kilometers in every direction, a city and space housing representatives from over 100 species. The architecture was deliberately neutral, designed to accommodate beings of all shapes and sizes. Gravity varied by section, atmosphere was adjustable. Translation systems operated in real time, managing thousands of languages simultaneously. The hearing was scheduled for the central chamber, a massive amphitheater where the council met to discuss matters affecting the entire galactic community. As Taman entered with the Canul delegation, he felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on him. The representatives sat in ascending rings around a central floor, where speakers would present their cases. He spotted the human delegation in their assigned section. To his shock, Minho was among them. His brother had managed to get himself assigned as an observer. When their eyes met, Minho gave a small nod of encouragement. It steadied Taman's nerves. The session began with formal introductions. The council chair, a being from a species called the Veil, spoke in a voice that the translators rendered as calm and authoritative. We gathered to address concerns about the relationship between the Canul Empire and the human species. Some fear this alliance threatens stability, Others questioned the motives behind it. We will hear testimony from all parties and make recommendations. Representatives from various species spoke first. The Oran Collective, a merchant federation, expressed worry about Kano military power gaining human technological innovation. A species that had suffered under human colonial expansion warned against trusting humanity's motives. A military alliance that viewed the Kano as aggressive warned against encouraging them. Admiral Kwan bristled at some of the accusations, but Yuna remained calm. When it was the Kanal's turn to speak, she rose with quiet dignity. We do not seek to threaten anyone. Our relationship with Guardian Taman began not through political calculation, but through an act of personal courage. He saved our children's lives when he had no reason to risk his own. This taught us that individuals can transcend the worst of their species. We invite you to consider the same. Then it was Taman's turn. He walked to the center floor, feeling very small under the enormous dome. Hundreds of alien faces watched him, some curious, some suspicious, some openly hostile. He took a breath and began. I'm not a politician or a diplomat, he said. His voice picked up by the chamber's systems and translated instantly. I'm just someone who made a choice during a storm. 2 children were dying and I couldn't leave them. It didn't matter that they weren't human. It didn't matter that I didn't know who they were. They needed help and I could provide it. That's all. But your species has a history of exploitation, one representative interrupted. How do we know this is not a manipulation to gain access to Kanal military resources? You don't, Taman said honestly. I can't prove my motives were pure. I can only tell you what happened and let you decide. But I've spent 6 months with the Kanul now. I've learned about their culture. I've taught their children. I've made friends. And I've learned that we're not as different as we look. Kanal love their families. They feel fear and joy and sadness. They create art and music. They laugh at jokes. They're people just like humans, just like all of you. People who control one of the largest military fleets in the galaxy, another voice called out. Yes, Taman agreed. And people who could have killed me the moment they found me with their children. Instead, they listened. They gave me a chance to explain. Empress Yuna invited me to teach her children about human culture, to help them understand a species most Kanul have never interacted with. That takes courage. That takes a willingness to look past fear and prejudice. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Every species in this chamber has probably done terrible things. Humans certainly have. We've destroyed our own planet, enslaved others, fought wars over resources and territory. I'm not here to defend those actions. But I'm also not defined only by those actions. None of us should be. We should be judged by what we choose to do now, today, in this moment. Pretty words, a skeptical voice said. But what substance backs them? Taman thought about Hana and her love of human poetry, about Dr. Junho and their shared research, about Mirai and Jinho and the lessons they taught each other. I've seen Kanul crew members reading human books. I've watched them try human food. I've heard them ask questions about Earth and our history, not with suspicion but with genuine curiosity. And I've learned Kanul songs, studied their medicine, participated in their ceremonies. This is substance, connection, understanding. It's small, yes, but it's real. The questions continued for over an hour. Some representatives seemed genuinely interested in his perspective. Others clearly wanted to discredit him. Through it all, Taman answered as honestly as he could. He didn't claim to have all the answers. He didn't pretend the situation was simple. He just kept coming back to the basic truth. One act of kindness had opened a door. What walked through that door next was up to all of them. Finally, the council chair called for a recess. The session would resume in 2 days after deliberations. As Taman left the chamber, Minho caught up with him in the corridor. His brother pulled him into a tight hug, something he hadn't done since they were children. You did well, Minho said, better than any professional diplomat could have. You told the truth without hiding behind politics. I don't know how to do anything else, Taman replied, feeling exhausted. That's your strength, Minho said. Colonial administrators may not like you, but ordinary humans, they're starting to see you as a symbol of what we could be. The news coverage of this hearing is huge. People are watching. Children on Earth are learning your story in schools. That thought terrified Taman more than facing the council. I'm not a hero. I just did what anyone should have done. But most people wouldn't have, Minho said gently. That's what makes it matter. Princess Mirai's tail wagged and she pressed closer to Taman. Even 3 months had passed since the storm, and Taemin's life had transformed beyond recognition. His quarters aboard the Eternal Fang were larger than his entire research station had been, with windows that showed the stars sliding past as the flagship traveled between systems. He had a workspace, a bedroom, even a small garden where he grew earth plants that fascinated the Kanul crew members who visited. But the biggest change was no longer being alone. Every morning, Princess Mirai and Prince Jinho arrived for lessons. Mirai's leg had healed perfectly, and both children had grown noticeably in just 3 months. They were learning human language directly from him now, though they still preferred using their own speech. Their intelligence amazed him. They grasped concepts that would challenge human children twice their age. Today's lesson was about human history. Taemin showed them images of Earth, explaining how humans had almost destroyed their own world before learning to reach for the stars. Jinho asked difficult questions about war and environmental collapse. Mirai wanted to know why humans hurt each other if they were the same species. Taemin answered honestly, not sugarcoating the darker parts of human nature. Humans make mistakes, he explained. Big ones. But some of us try to learn from them and do better. That's what matters. Not being perfect, but trying to improve. Like you went into the storm even though it was scary? Mirai asked in careful human speech. Exactly like that, Taemin agreed, feeling proud of her progress. After lessons, he often had lunch with Lieutenant Hana, a young pilot who had become his friend. She was curious about everything human, especially literature. Today she brought questions about a book he had recommended, a collection of Earth poetry. This poet speaks of loneliness like it is a friend, Hana said, her ears tilted in confusion. How can pain be friendly? Sometimes pain reminds us we're alive, Taemin said. Sometimes it's all we have to hold on to when everything else is gone. Hana studied him with those perceptive eyes. You speak from experience. You were lonely on Arcturus 7. I was, he admitted. I chose isolation because I was afraid of losing more people I cared about. Turns out, isolation just meant I was losing myself slowly instead. But now you are not alone, Hana said. Now you have Pac, us, the heirs. Even Admiral Kwan has stopped glaring at you during court sessions. That made Taemin laugh. Admiral Kwan still didn't trust him, but the old soldier had at least stopped openly arguing against his presence. Small progress was still progress. His afternoons were often spent with Dr. Junho, the chief medical officer. Junho was older, experienced, and fascinated by human biology. They collaborated on research that compared Kanul and human physiology, finding surprising similarities despite their obvious differences. Both species valued family bonds. Both felt similar emotions. Both needed social connections to thrive. Your presence has changed the crew, Junho mentioned one day while they examined cell samples. They talk about you. Some with suspicion, yes, but many with curiosity. They wonder if humans might be more like us than we thought. Are we? Taemin asked. In the ways that matter? Perhaps, Junho said thoughtfully. We both love our children. We both feel fear and courage. We both create art and music. The surface differences hide deeper similarities, but not everyone was warming to him. That became painfully clear when Taemin received a message from his brother Minho. The communication had been routed through official human colonial channels, which meant it had been read and analyzed by administrators. Minho's face on the screen looked older than Taemin remembered, tired and worried. Taemin, what are you doing? Minho asked without greeting. Every human colony is talking about you. The man who saved alien royalty. Some call you a hero. Others say you're a traitor getting too close to a military power. Colonial administrators are nervous. They want to know whose side you're on. I'm not on anyone's side, Taemin replied in his recording. I'm just teaching 2 children and trying to help humans and Kanul understand each other. Why does that have to be political? Because everything is political when it involves empires and power, Minho shot back. Be careful, brother. You're becoming a symbol whether you want to be or not, and symbols get used by people with agendas. The warning troubled Taemin, but he had little time to dwell on it. News was spreading across the galaxy about the human guardian of the Kanul heirs. Some species saw it as positive, proof that cooperation was possible. Others viewed it with suspicion or anger. A group calling themselves the Purity Front released statements calling Taemin's presence a contamination, claiming that mixing species and cultures would destroy the unique identity of each. Then came the attack. The Eternal Fang was escorting a diplomatic convoy to a neutral station where Empress Yuna would meet with leaders of other species. It was meant to be routine. But halfway through the journey, ships dropped out of hyperspace around them. Raiders, but organized and well-equipped. The Purity Front had moved from words to violence. Alarms screamed through the flagship. Taemin was in his quarters when it started, and his first thought was of Mirai and Jinho. He ran through corridors where crew members rushed to battle stations. He found the children with their guards in a secured section, frightened but safe. "Uncle Taemin," Mirai cried, pressing against him. "What is happening?" "Bad people are attacking," he said, keeping his voice calm. "But your mother's fleet will protect us. Everything will be okay." Through the walls, he could feel the ship shuddering as weapons fire struck shields. The battle lasted 20 minutes, though it felt like hours. Empress Yuna's forces drove off the attackers, but not before one of the escort ships took critical damage. That ship sent a distress signal. Survivors were trapped in damaged sections, losing atmosphere fast. Commander Sora organized rescue teams immediately. As they prepared to deploy, Taemin stepped forward. "Let me help. I know human emergency procedures. Some of them might work in situations your protocols don't cover." Sora hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Come then, but stay behind our soldiers and follow orders exactly." The rescue mission launched in fast assault shuttles. They reached the damaged escort and forced entry through a cargo airlock. Inside was chaos. Emergency lights flickered. Smoke filled corridors. Wounded Kanul called for help. Taemin followed the team as they worked systematically to evacuate survivors. Then he heard something the Kanul didn't. A faint tapping, following a pattern. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS in ancient Earth Morse code. Someone in this mixed crew knew human signals. "Wait," Taemin said, grabbing Lieutenant Hana's arm. She was leading one of the rescue squads. "There's someone that way. I can hear them." "Our sensors show nothing in that section," Hana said, but she trusted him enough to investigate. They found a collapsed bulkhead blocking a small room. Behind it, trapped in darkness, was Lieutenant Hana's wingmate, a young pilot named Dae-hyun, who had studied human culture. He had been tapping the SOS signal, hoping someone would understand. Together, Taemin and the rescue team cleared the debris and pulled him out. His leg was crushed, but he would live. As they carried Dae-hyun to safety, the ship shuddered again. A support beam, weakened by weapons fire, finally gave way. It fell directly toward Lieutenant Hana. Taemin saw it happening as if in slow motion. He threw himself forward, shoving Hana aside. The beam caught him across the shoulder and back, slamming him to the floor. Pain exploded through his body. He heard shouting, felt hands grabbing him. Someone was screaming, and he realized distantly it was him. Then darkness came. He woke in the medical bay, surrounded by worried faces. Dr. Junho was working on him with focused intensity. Empress Yuna stood nearby with her children. Commander Sora and Lieutenant Hana were there too, both looking shaken. "Stupid human," Hana said, her voice thick with emotion. "Brave, stupid human. You saved my life." "Seemed fair," Taemin managed through the pain medication. "You all saved mine when you came to Arcturus 7. He has broken ribs, a fractured shoulder, and severe bruising," Junho reported to Yuna. "But he will recover fully. He is surprisingly sturdy for someone so fragile-looking." "Fragile in body, perhaps," Yuna said quietly. "But strong where it matters." She looked at Taemin with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You continue to surprise me, Guardian. Most species become comfortable in safety. You ran toward danger to help people who are not even your kind." "They're my friends," Taemin said simply. "That's all the reason I needed." Over the next few days as he recovered, something shifted aboard the Eternal Fang. Crew members who had been distant before now nodded to him in corridors. Some brought small gifts. Hana visited daily, bringing him books and gossip. Even Admiral Kwan stopped by briefly, saying nothing but placing a fist over his chest in that gesture of respect before leaving. Mirai and Jinho barely left his side when they were allowed to visit. They brought him drawings they had made, pictures of the storm and the rescue, with a figure labeled Uncle Taman standing in both scenes. "You keep saving people," Jinho said, climbing carefully onto the medical bed to sit next to him. "Is that what humans do?" "The good ones try to," Taman said, putting an arm around the boy. "Not because they want praise or reward, just because it's right." "Then I want to be like a human," Mirai announced. "Brave." The flagship Eternal Fang was beyond anything Taman had imagined. The corridors were wide enough for 3 Kanul to walk side by side, with walls that seemed to be grown rather than built, smooth and organic. Lights pulsed gently overhead, following their group as they walked. Every surface was clean and functional, but there was an aesthetic beauty to it all that reminded him of nature rather than machinery. Crew members stopped to stare as they passed. Word had spread quickly. The human who saved the heirs was aboard. Taman felt hundreds of eyes on him, and he kept his head down, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. Princess Mirai and Prince Jinho stayed close, which seemed to confuse the crew even more. Commander Sora led them through security checkpoints where guards saluted with precise movements. They entered an elevator that moved both up and sideways through the massive ship. Finally, the doors opened to reveal a grand corridor lined with guards in ceremonial armor. At the end stood enormous doors marked with symbols that needed no translation. This was the heart of the Empire. "The throne hall," Sora said quietly. "Remember, human, speak only truth. Show respect but do not grovel. The Empress values strength and honesty." "What if she's angry?" Taman asked, his voice barely steady. "Then pray she grants you a quick death," one of the other soldiers said. Several others made sounds of agreement. "Enough," Sora snapped. "The heirs live because of him. The Empress is not unreasonable." But even Sora sounded uncertain. The doors opened silently. The room beyond was enormous, easily 100 meters long and 50 wide. The ceiling arched high above, showing stars through what must have been transparent sections. At the far end on a raised platform sat 2 thrones, and on those thrones sat the most regal beings Taman had ever seen. Empress Yuna was larger than any Kanul he had seen so far, her silver-blue fur marked with streaks of white that formed patterns like frost. She wore armor that was both functional and beautiful, decorated with gems that caught the light. Her eyes were the same as her children's, large and intelligent, but they held a weight of command and exhaustion. Next to her sat Prince Consort Doyen, nearly as imposing, his darker fur marked with battle scars. His expression was harder to read, but his posture was tense. Around the room stood dozens of important-looking Kanul, dressed in formal clothing or armor. This was the Imperial Court, and they were all watching him. Sora led the group forward, and Taman followed, his heart pounding so hard he thought everyone could hear it. When they reached the middle of the room, Sora knelt. The other soldiers followed. Taman, uncertain, did the same. His knees hit the floor with a sound that seemed too loud in the sudden silence. Then Princess Mirai broke away from the group. She limped forward on 3 legs, dragging her splinted leg, making distressed sounds. Prince Jinho followed immediately. They crossed the space between Taman's group and the thrones in seconds. Empress Yuna stood so quickly her throne rocked. Prince Consort Doyen was only a moment behind her. Both parents rushed down from the platform. What happened next shocked Taman more than anything else so far. The rulers of a galactic empire dropped to the floor and gathered their children close, making sounds that needed no translation. Relief, love, the fear of parents who thought they had lost everything. For several minutes, the reunion continued. The court watched in respectful silence. Taman remained kneeling, unsure if he should look away. This felt private, too intimate for strangers to witness. But he couldn't help watching as Prince Jinho pressed against his mother's chest and Princess Mirai nuzzled her father's hands. They were a family, and that transcended species. Finally, Empress Yuna composed herself. She carefully checked Mirai's splinted leg, examined both children thoroughly, then looked up. Her eyes found Taman immediately, and the weight of that gaze nearly made him look away. But he remembered Sora's words. Show respect, but do not grovel. He met her eyes and held them. Human, Yuna said, her voice carrying easily through the hall. The translator rendered it with a tone of controlled emotion. You are Taman Park? Yes, Your Majesty, Taman replied, hoping the title was correct. Rise. I do not speak to those who kneel unless they are my enemies or my subjects. You are neither. Taman stood, his legs shaking slightly. The Empress walked forward, her children staying close. Up close, she was even more imposing. She could have killed him with one hand, and they both knew it. But what he saw in her eyes was not anger. It was assessment. Tell me what happened, she commanded. Every detail, so Taman told the story. He explained about the storm, the bio-readings, his decision to go outside despite the danger. He described finding the pups, their condition, the treatment he provided. He spoke about the night he spent keeping them warm, talking to them, naming them. As he talked, he watched Yuna's expression shift from hard authority to something softer. When he finished, silence filled the hall. Then Prince Jinho spoke up, his voice young but clear. The translator struggled with it, showing it as something like, Mother, Uncle Taman gave me food. He said we would be okay. He kept the bad storm away, Uncle Taman. The word sent murmurs through the court. Princess Mirai added her own chirps and sounds, gesturing with her small hands. Yuna listened to her children, then looked at Prince Consort Doyen. Some silent communication passed between them. You risked your life for strangers, Yuna said finally, for creatures you did not know, could not communicate with, and had no obligation toward. Why, they were dying, Taman said simply. How could I not try to help? Many would have stayed safe inside, Prince Consort Doyen said, speaking for the first time. His voice was deeper than Yuna's, rougher. Many would have calculated the risk and chosen their own survival. Maybe, Taman admitted, but I wouldn't have been able to live with that choice. Sometimes you have to do what's right even when it's dangerous. More murmurs from the court. One figure stepped forward, an older Kanul with gray mixed into his fur and metals covering his chest. Empress, a word of caution. This human's actions, while fortunate, should not blind us to reality. Humans are known across the galaxy for their exploitation of others. Their colonies have enslaved lesser species. Their corporations strip worlds bare. One kind act does not erase these truths. Admiral Quan speaks wisdom, another court member said. We should reward this human and send him away before he becomes a complication. Taman felt anger flare in his chest. I won't deny that humans have done terrible things. We're not perfect. Some of us are greedy, cruel, selfish. But some of us try to be better. Judge me by what I did, not by what others of my species have done. The boldness of speaking back to the court made several Kanul hiss in surprise. Admiral Quan's ears flattened against his head. Insolent! You dare lecture us about judgment? Admiral, Empress Yuna said sharply, silencing him. She studied Taman again with those penetrating eyes. You speak of being judged by your actions. Very well. Your actions saved my children's lives. In Kanul culture, this creates what we call a life debt. It is the highest honor we can bestow. It means that the imperial family owes you a debt that can never be fully repaid. What do you want, Taman Park? Name your price. Wealth, technology? A world of your own? Whatever you ask, if it is within my power, it is yours. The offer hung in the air. Taman could hear his own breathing. He thought about his small station, his isolated life. He thought about the poverty he had seen on human colonies, the struggles of people trying to survive on frontier worlds. He could ask for anything. He could become rich beyond imagination. He looked down at Princess Mirai and Prince Jinho, who were watching him with trusting eyes. I don't want payment. I didn't save them for a reward. I saved them because it was right. If you want to repay me, then let this be a start toward humans and Kanul understanding each other better. Let it be proof that we can work together, help each other, instead of being suspicious and afraid. The court erupted. Some voices sounded angry, others shocked. Admiral Quan looked like he wanted to argue more, but Empress Yuna raised one hand and silence fell immediately. You refuse wealth and power to ask for friendship between species? She sounded genuinely surprised. This is not what I expected from a human. Maybe that's the problem, Taman said quietly. Everyone expecting the worst from each other. Yuna was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something that sent the court into stunned silence. She placed her fist over her chest and bowed to Taman. The same gesture Sora had used. Taman Park, You have given me back what is most precious to me. You have shown me that my assumptions about your species were incomplete. I offer you a place in my household as guardian and teacher to my children. They need to learn about the wider galaxy, about different ways of thinking. You will teach them about humanity, about compassion, about the courage to do what is right even when afraid. Will you accept? Taemin's mind reeled. Live here? Teach alien royalty? Leave behind everything he knew? He looked at the two pups again. Mirai was leaning against his leg now, trusting him completely. Jinho watched him with hope in those large eyes. These were children who had almost died in a storm. Children who now called him uncle. How could he abandon them? I accept, Your Majesty, he said. I'll do my best. Prince Jinho made an excited sound and bounced on his feet. Taemin's hands shook as he tried to make sense of the chaos erupting across his communication systems. Every screen in his station flashed with incoming signals in languages he had never seen. The translation software struggled to keep up, spitting out fragments that made no sense. His defense alert system showed that hundreds of targeting locks had fixed on his exact location. He was being watched by an entire fleet. Behind him, the pups stirred in their recovery bed. Hanel made a small chirping sound, and Biol lifted his head groggily. They seemed unbothered by the noise and flashing lights. Taemin glanced back at them, then returned his attention to the screens. His mind raced through possibilities. Pirates? No, pirates didn't travel in fleets this size. An invasion? But why target a backwater research station on an empty planet? One of the ships broke formation and began descending directly toward his station. It was smaller than the massive warships above, but still dwarfed his entire facility. Taemin watched it land about 100 meters from his front door, its engines kicking up clouds of dust and small rocks. The landing was precise, professional, military. A door opened in the ship's side and a ramp extended to the ground. Figures emerged, moving in tight formation. Taemin counted 12 of them, all wearing what looked like advanced armor. But their shapes were wrong for humans. They moved on digitigrade legs like animals, but with the posture and coordination of trained soldiers. As they approached, he could see them more clearly through his window. They were like the pups, but fully grown and walking upright. 7 feet tall, covered in the same silver-blue fur with wolf-like heads and large, intelligent eyes. They carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. The lead figure raised one hand and the group stopped about 20 meters from the station. That hand gesture was universal enough. They wanted to talk, not fight. At least not yet. Taemin's communication console beeped. An incoming transmission request, this time with compatible protocols. His translation software locked onto it immediately. He hesitated only a moment before accepting. A voice came through, deep and controlled, speaking through the translator with only a slight mechanical edge. Human inside the structure. We are the Kanul Empire. We have scanned your facility. You are harboring 2 of our people. Send them out immediately and you will not be harmed. Taemin looked back at Hanul and Biol. They were watching him now, both fully awake. Harboring? He had saved them from dying in a storm. But explaining that through a translator to an armed squad of alien soldiers seemed unlikely to go well. He pressed the transmit button. This is Taemin Park, xenobiologist. I found 2 injured juveniles during the storm last night. They needed medical attention. I can bring them out, but please understand I meant no harm. I was trying to help. There was a pause. He could hear voices talking in the background, speaking rapidly in their own language. Then the main voice returned, and something in its tone had changed. Less hostile, more uncertain. You claim you provided medical care? The heirs are injured. Heirs. Taemin felt his stomach drop. What had he stumbled into? He looked at the 2 pups again. They didn't look like royalty. They looked like 2 scared children who had almost died in a storm. He pressed transmit again. One has a broken leg. I said it properly. Both were suffering from severe exposure. I've stabilized them through the night. They're recovering, but they need rest. Another longer pause. More background voices, these ones sounding agitated. Then a different voice came through the communicator, sharper and more authoritative. Human. I am Commander Sora of the Imperial Guard. You will open your facility immediately. If the heirs have been harmed in any way, your death will be slow. If you have cared for them as you claim, we will speak further. Do you understand? I understand, Taemin said. His mouth was dry. I'm opening the door now. Please don't shoot. I'm unarmed. He walked to the airlock controls and initiated the opening sequence. The outer door slid open with a hiss. Through the inner door's window, he could see the K'nul soldiers tense, weapons raised. Then Commander Sora stepped forward, and the others held position. Sora was slightly taller than the rest, with darker fur marked by several scars. The commander's armor was more elaborate, marked with symbols that probably indicated rank. Those large eyes fixed on Taman as Sora entered the airlock, then the inner door. Up close, the K'nul was even more imposing. But Taman noticed something else, too. Sora's ears were pressed back, and there was something in those eyes that he recognized. Fear. Worry. "Where are they?" Sora asked, and the translator couldn't quite hide the emotion in that question. "This way," Taman said, stepping back and gesturing toward the medical area. "Please, they're resting. Try not to startle them." Sora moved past him quickly but stopped at the doorway to the medical area. Hanil and Bayal were sitting up in the recovery bed, watching. When they saw Sora, both pups made excited chirping sounds and tried to stand. Bayal managed it, but Hanil's splinted leg made movement difficult. The change in Commander Sora was immediate. The warrior disappeared, replaced by someone who rushed forward with obvious relief. Sora knelt beside the bed and began speaking rapidly in their own language, examining both pups with gentle hands. Hanul and Biol pressed against the commander, making more chirping and whining sounds. It was clearly a reunion. Taman stood back, uncertain what to do. Other K'nul soldiers had entered the station now, but they lowered their weapons when they saw the scene in the medical area. Several of them looked at Taman with expressions he couldn't quite read. Surprise? Confusion? Sora stood finally and turned to face Taman. The commander studied him for a long moment, then did something unexpected. Sora placed a closed fist over the chest and bowed slightly. The other soldiers immediately copied the gesture. "Human Taman Park," Sora said formally. "You have cared for Princess Mirai and Prince Jinho of the K'nul Empire. You saved the children of Empress Yuna herself. This is a debt that cannot be easily repaid. Princess, Prince, Empress." The words hit Taman like physical blows. He had been calling them Hanul and Biol, treating them like lost pets. He had carried royalty through a storm bundled in a thermal blanket. His knees felt weak. "I didn't know," he managed to say. "They were dying. Anyone would have helped." Sora's ears twitched forward, a gesture that might have been surprise. "Would they?" "In our experience, most species do not risk themselves for strangers, especially not for K'nul. Many consider us beasts because of our appearance." "They're children," Taman said simply. "That's all that mattered." One of the other soldiers said something in their language. Sora responded, then turned back to Taman. "The Empress herself is in orbit aboard the flagship. She demands to meet you immediately. You will come with us." It wasn't really a request, but Sora's tone wasn't threatening either. Taman nodded slowly. "Can I bring my medical kit?" "I should check Princess Mirai's leg again soon. Make sure the splint is holding." Several soldiers made sounds that the translator interpreted as surprised laughter. Sora's expression softened slightly. "You may bring whatever you wish, human. But know that we have medical facilities far beyond your equipment. The heirs will receive the best care possible." "I'm sure you do," Taman said. "But I started treating them. I'd like to see it through if that's allowed." Sora studied him again with those intelligent eyes. "You're either very brave or very foolish. The Empress is not known for her patience, especially regarding her children. But your concern for them may serve you well. Come, we should not delay." Taman grabbed his medical kit and a few personal items. As he moved toward the door, Princess Mirai, the one he had called Hanul, made a soft whining sound. She was trying to follow him, dragging her splinted leg. Prince Jinho stayed close to his sister, supporting her. "They want to come," one of the soldiers said, sounding amazed. Sora knelt and spoke gently to both pups. They responded with chirps and whines, clearly arguing. Finally, Sora stood and looked at Taman with an expression that might have been respect. "They insist you travel with them. They say you are Pack, that you protected them when their own guards failed. This is most unusual. Normally the heirs do not trust outsiders." "I just kept them warm," Taman said, feeling overwhelmed, "and gave them some medical attention." "Nothing special, perhaps to you," Sora replied. "But to them and to the Empress it is everything. Come, the Empire waits." The trip to the shuttle was surreal. Taman walked surrounded by elite soldiers with two alien princes who kept pressing close to his legs. As they boarded the shuttle, he caught a glimpse of his small research station growing tiny below them. His quiet, isolated life was gone. Above, the massive flagship waited, and with it an empress who would decide his fate. As the shuttle rose toward the fleet, Princess Mirai rested her head against Taemin's hand. He gently scratched behind her ears like he would with any frightened child. She made a contented sound. Across from him, Commander Sora watched this interaction with an expression that was definitely surprise. "The Empress will want to know everything," Sora said quietly. "Tell the truth, human. That is your best chance." "I don't know how to do anything else," Taemin replied, and meant it. The shuttle docked with the flagship, and the door opened into a future Taemin could never have imagined. The wind screamed across the barren landscape of Arcturus 7 like a wounded beast. Inside his small research station, Taemin Park watched the storm approach through reinforced windows that rattled with each gust. He had seen bad weather before during his 3 years on this remote planet, but nothing like this. The computer screens around him flashed red warnings. Electromagnetic interference levels were off the charts. The storm was generating enough raw energy to fry any equipment left outside. Taemin moved quickly through his small home, securing loose items and checking the backup power systems. He lived alone out here, cataloging alien plants and animals for the Colonial Science Division. It was lonely work, but he preferred it that way. He had chosen this isolation deliberately. 5 years ago, raiders had attacked his family's colony. His parents died in the assault. His younger brother Minho survived, but their relationship fractured under the weight of grief. Taemin ran away to the frontier, to places where human voices couldn't remind him of what he had lost. Here among the rocks and strange vegetation of Arcturus 7, he found something close to peace. Lightning split the purple sky outside, followed by thunder that shook the entire station. Taemin sat at his main console, monitoring the storm's progress. His sensors tracked wind speeds exceeding 200 kilometers per hour. The electromagnetic pulses were creating cascading failures across his external equipment array. He would have weeks of repairs ahead of him once this passed. Then something unusual appeared on his bioscanner. 2 life signs, small and weak, were moving erratically near the cliff base about half a kilometer from the station. The readings flickered in and out as the storm's interference played havoc with his sensors. Taemin leaned closer to the screen, frowning. Nothing should be out in this weather. The local wildlife knew enough to hide deep underground when storms like this approached. He watched the signals for several minutes. They weren't moving toward shelter. Instead, they seemed to be staggering aimlessly, growing weaker with each passing moment. Something was very wrong. Taemin stood and walked to the equipment locker. His rational mind told him to stay inside where it was safe. Going out in this storm violated every safety protocol in the manual, but his hands were already reaching for his environmental suit, pulling the heavy gear from its rack. He couldn't explain why those 2 fading biosignatures bothered him so much. Maybe it was because he knew what it felt like to be helpless and alone in a storm. The suit was designed to protect him from Arcturus 7's harsh environment. It had atmospheric processors, thermal regulation, and electromagnetic shielding rated for minor storms. This was not a minor storm. Taemin sealed the helmet and ran a quick diagnostic check. Everything showed green. He grabbed a medical kit and an emergency beacon, then stepped into the airlock. The moment the outer door opened, the storm tried to rip him off his feet. Wind slammed into him like a physical wall. Rain that glowed faintly blue from the planet's unusual minerals pelted his helmet, reducing visibility to almost nothing. Taemin activated his suit's guidance system and started walking toward the cliff base, fighting for every step. The journey that should have taken 10 minutes stretched into 30. Twice he lost his footing and had to grab onto rocks to avoid being blown away. Lightning struck the ground less than 50 meters to his left, leaving a crater of fused glass. The electromagnetic pulse from the strike made his suit's systems flicker and reset. His heart pounded in his chest, but he kept moving forward. When he finally reached the cliffs, he had to search carefully. The bioscanner in his suit was barely functional, giving him only general direction. He climbed over fallen rocks and pushed through sheets of rain that felt like tiny hammers. Then he saw them. 2 small creatures huddled against a boulder seeking shelter that wasn't there. They looked like wolves, but unlike any wolf from Earth. Their fur was silver blue and seemed to shimmer even in the storm's darkness. They were each about the size of a large dog, but clearly young, probably pups. One of them had its leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Both were soaked through, shivering violently. When Taemin approached, they tried to growl, but the sounds were weak and pitiful. Their eyes were remarkable, larger than they should be, and showed an intelligence that made him pause. These were not simple animals. He knelt slowly, making himself less threatening, and opened the medical kit. The injured pup snapped at him when he reached for its leg. Taman pulled back, then tried again, moving slowly and speaking in a calm voice. He didn't know if they could understand tone, but it was all he had. Gradually, the pup stopped resisting. It was too weak to fight anymore. Its companion pressed close, watching Taman with those unnervingly intelligent eyes. He worked quickly. The leg was broken but not shattered. He applied a temporary splint and gave the pup an injection of general-purpose pain medication that should work across most carbon-based life forms. Then he wrapped both creatures in a thermal blanket from his kit. They were so cold that their body temperatures barely registered on his scanner. Carrying both pups was difficult, but Taman managed to secure them against his chest using the thermal blanket and some equipment straps. They were lighter than he expected, though they struggled weakly at first. The journey back to the station was even harder than the trip out. The storm had intensified and he was carrying extra weight. Several times he fell to his knees, but each time he forced himself back up. When he finally stumbled through the airlock door, Taman collapsed. The inner door sealed behind him, cutting off the storm's roar. In the sudden relative silence, he could hear his own ragged breathing and the faint whimpers of the pups. He pulled off his helmet and looked down at the two small aliens in his arms. They stared back at him with those large, knowing eyes. "You're safe now," he said softly, though he knew they couldn't understand. "Let me help you." He carried them to a small medical area and set up a heated recovery bed. The pups tried to stay together, so he let them curl up against each other while he worked. He cleaned their wounds properly, reset the broken leg with better equipment, and started an IV drip with nutrients and fluids. His computer analyzed their biology and suggested compatible treatments. As he worked through the night, Taman talked to them quietly. He told them about the storm, about his research, about stupid things that didn't matter. The sound of his voice seemed to calm them. Eventually, he decided they needed names. The one with markings that looked like clouds he called Hanul, which meant sky. The other had spots that resembled stars, so he became Biol. By the time morning arrived, both pups were sleeping peacefully. Their vital signs had stabilized. Hanul's leg was properly set and would heal. Biol no longer shivered. Taman sat in a chair next to them, exhausted but satisfied. He had saved 2 lives. In his years of isolation, that felt like more than he had accomplished in a long time. The storm had passed. Taman stood and stretched his sore muscles. He should check the damage outside, see what equipment could be salvaged. He walked to the window and looked out at the clear morning sky. Then he froze. The sky was not empty. Massive ships hung in the atmosphere, so many that they blotted out sections of the purple-blue horizon. They were descending slowly, deliberately. Taman counted 10, then 20, then stopped counting. There had to be hundreds. No, thousands. His computer suddenly erupted with incoming signals, alarms, and warnings, all screaming at once. Taman stood at the window, staring up at the armada, and realized that saving 2 small creatures in a storm had changed everything.